in doing this movie, you had to do a lot of preparation. Did you learn, Josh, yeah, did you have to learn how to solder?
I did. I really did. I had to learn how to solder. I took computer programming courses. I really immersed myself. I was kind of late to the party. By the time I had my first phone call with Ashton, he was already living in Jobs' shoes, which terrified me. I was like, oh God, I've got a lot of work to do. It was like cramming for the SATs the night before. So, you know, Josh was brilliant in providing me and all the actors with as many resources as possible to capture that authenticity, so that, you know, you're not necessarily faking it. And in fact, I did burn myself on a number of occasions. But it was worth it, because you got to believe that these guys know exactly what they're doing. Otherwise, I don't think you can go on this journey with them. So it was about that, and it was also about, you know, pouring through the hundreds of hours of collection of footage and audio recordings of the man. It was about reading as much literature and absorbing as much as possible, whether it was Aiwaz or whether it was the Isaacson book. And so when I was able to kind of build a map in order to access this character, you do all that work, and then the funniest thing about that, the most ironic part, is that you just got to let it all go. You know, you got to tell the story, and all that has to become secondary. You can't make a performance about the way somebody speaks. It has to be second to what the story is that you're telling, what the feel of that stuff is.
I mean, for me, the movie was always, you know, stepping back from the technical aspect of it and all of the reality of that he was a real person we're all aware of. It was really kind of a sort of mythic tale to me that fit all of the sort of spots that we see in Shakespeare and in most, you know, you have a guy who was adopted. He was brought up by parents who were working people, but he was sort of like, if you were to put it in sort of mythological terms, sort of the peasants, and he didn't sort of never believed they were, you know, he wanted bigger and better things, and he sort of meets this ragtag group of guys, and they kind of storm the kingdom, and he gets in there, but he's sort of never seen as sort of the prince who sort of was, you know, legitimate, and they kick him out. And then he spends 10 years in the wilderness, and he comes back, and in order to sort of, you know, really get the throne back, he has to get rid of everybody that was there. So it was really a redemption story in the end, and I think it was very important. It was important to see that he learned something from his youth. He learned how to operate in a business world. Because this is a movie about the business of vision. If you have a vision, how does that translate into the business? Because you have a board of directors, and their whole purpose is to clamp down on risk. But how do you create something amazing without risk? And so at the end, you know, when he sees these things that Jonathan and I was doing, he's like, there's no way we're going to be able to do any of this because the board won't let us, you know. Let's do some Bondi blue translucent computer that looks like an egg, you know. And that's what they did with the first iMac. And then the laptop looked like a clamshell. I mean, you know, they were never going to let him do that. He knew he had to take over in the end. So it was important for us to show that sort of last bit of his life. It was more like to me, a sort of an epilogue in some regards. You know, yet where our movie ends is really the beginning.
Our movie is sort of a prequel to a non-existent movie.
Yes.
It's a prequel to an idea that everybody, well, you almost acknowledge the fact that everybody knows the sequel.
Yeah.
Everybody you know that coming from my generation, Apple. When you say the word Apple, it means this. It means cell phones, iPhones. It means iPods. It means Mac, you know, and there isn't necessarily, the first place you go is not necessarily this clunky device that almost seems barbaric now, where it was basically utilized as it was a cool word processor that did a few other things that was like mind-boggling. Now if you showed that to like my kid, she'd be like, what is this? This is crazy. Is this from the 1910s? You know, and I think that's what's so cool about this film is, speaking for myself, I didn't know a lot of this. I knew the basic gist of it, but I didn't really know the details about how this all came about, how this corporation that stands for so much in the way of technological innovation started.
And it was, I mean, that's the inspiration of the movie, is that it started in a small garage. We filmed in the actual garage where Steve grew up, and then he started Apple One in. And, you know, it's about a guy and a bunch of friends who were soldering. I mean, it was like people forget it was like the Iron Age. It was just metal and heat. And that was what was creating these boards. I mean, we kind of like romanticize it and think it's kind of all up there in the sort of technological digital world. It wasn't back then. It was very much, you know, analog and metal and plastic. And, you know, the fact that they did that, you know, and brought it to where it is now is sort of mind-boggling when you think about it, you know, and especially mind-boggling in a culture that kept those people on the outside. They weren't part of what was cool. They weren't part of the trend. They weren't part of what everybody else was sort of experiencing in the mid-70s, you know.
The nerd now is, I always said that if you were to do Revenge of the Nerds now, you would have to do the jock being the nerd, because the nerds have now taken over the world. And I think that these guys were paving the way for that, right? So that they were trend-setting in a way that nobody could have possibly imagined. You know, NoCal was not known at the time. It was known as kind of like people were experimenting with these things. But the Valley hadn't yet become Silicon Valley. It hadn't yet, you know, become that thing that is now where we think of every major technological giant coming from, especially when it comes to digital technology. So I think that there's something very cool about seeing it at its most nascent stages.
And I also think that what's fun about it in the period of the time is when, you know, the country after the Industrial Revolution hit the 60s and 70s, they sort of paused and said, we're now going to deal with the morality of the world. And what do we think about the way people, you know, war and how free love, you know, love and all that sort of stuff that was going on in the early 70s. But there was a huge amount of people that didn't participate in that sort of free love movement and hippies of that. They were on the outside of that. And as everybody else was exploring their newfound morality and freedom and sexual prowesses, they were sort of put in their garages to sort of left to their hobbies, right? And their hobbies became what was going to be the new Industrial Revolution, because when the hangover of the 70s occurred, and everybody else was sort of saying, where are we now after the disco age? Emerging from these garages were guys, you know, I'll tell you what we've been doing the last 10 years while you were all, you know, right before, this is also right before the AIDS happened in the early 80s. This is what we've been doing with our hobby kits, creating what will be the new world. And I think if it really weren't for the fact that they were sort of, as Steve said, the outsiders and the misfits, he was just basically saying they were the guys that just didn't get all the great stuff that people romanticize the 70s, you know, what it was about. And, you know, and Steve's sort of genius was recognizing that, recognizing the fact that, you know, this is what's next. This is what's cool. And these guys, these unlikely guys who were not anything cool about the 70s, not, you know, could not participate in it just for the fact of how they looked and how they were socialized. They're the ones who are going to be the people, or I'm going to be the one who's going to bring what they brought to the world, and it'll change everything. On some level, I knew that this could either be a very small indie with an unknown cast that would be sort of like video on demand and interesting, but sort of more of a lark. Or we could try to make something important and cast people that mean something, that are sort of, you know, putting Ashton in it, who, you know, just by the nature of who he is, might be sort of cause suspect, but also be interesting. There's something sexy and sort of vibrant about that choice. There's something curious about that choice. And I knew very early on the only way this movie would succeed was if there was a cultural curiosity about it. Because so many films, no matter what the subject matter is, I don't care who you're making the film about, can simply just, you know, you can make a film about Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis, or you can make a film about Lincoln and it can be on the Discovery Channel and have almost the same script, you know, but how do you position it so that it means something bigger from the very beginning? So I always felt that was what was important, and casting the right people, you know, casting Josh Gad, who was just so amazing in it. You know, and it come from theater and has some great films coming out. But just, I knew that when I saw the work he did, he'd get the pathos of it, get the heart of him, you know, more than anything, you know. And that's what it was about. It was, you know, so for me, there was a great risk in it, and that made it frightening. But as Josh will tell you, and as Ashton will tell you, it scared the hell out of everybody, and nobody more than the producer, you know, and certainly myself.
It was, I'm sure, a kind of a temptation to be so reverential toward this man who is such a genius, but you did choose to do the warts and all portrayal? How did you balance all
This
that?
period of his life, he had, you know, a vision, and he was exacting, and he had a lot of frustration about how to get that vision and translate that vision to people who had no point of reference as to what he was even talking about. And we're talking about MIT engineers who didn't know what he was talking about. You know, and at the same time, trying to find the humanity of that. And realizing at the end that even though I believe him to be sort of severely unsentimental towards his relationships, his love was his product. And that the movie's about the fact that he created something and found something in Woz's sort of house. And eventually he became synonymous with his product. Apple was him. So if people say this is a movie about Apple, or this is a movie about Steve Jobs, it's about a movie about Steve Jobs who creates a product and then becomes one with the product and everything else around him. His human relationships, everything that helped bring him there, faded into the past and became non-realities to him. He made them non-realities, you know, when he denied parenthood of his child, or he sort of distanced himself from his original friends.
Our discovery of researching a lot of these people, in many conversations, they would mention his fitful crying phases, or his, you know, his temper tantrums. And I think that that's an honest portrayal that is, you know, worthy of his own kind of sentiment about himself and some of the choices he made. He was a shrewd man. There's no denying that. And I think to a certain extent it might have cost him his first round with Apple. And it was that same sensibility that allowed him to come back and conquer. And I think that in order to tell an exacting portrait of this journey, this man, Steve Wozniak, this entire path as it was laid out, you have to be as accurate as possible, because if you're not, people will call your bluff. There's too much readily available material for people not to say, not so much, guys. You know, I'll wait till the next one. So I think we felt compelled to make sure that each one of these characters and each component of the story came with a level of authenticity that had to be addressed.
And to follow up on that, I think Ashton would tell you, or at least I would sort of, you know, join the thought that, you know, Steve showed love in his way, and his way he showed love was the things that he created eventually. That's how he expressed himself. And we sort of judge love and judge what, you know, kindness is on a certain, you know, on a certain level. But it can be really interpreted a different way. But that goes to one other thing, which is that if you're going to play these characters, if you know, Ashton is playing Steve and Josh is playing Wozniak, you have to fall in love with the characters.
You have to.
You have to love them. You have to know why they're doing it. You know, and Ashton had a few really tough moments in this movie where he was saying what on the outside was pretty tough stuff, denying the paternity of his daughter, denying sort of the shares to the people who started the company with him. And he had to find out what the reality for Steve was, because with Steve had a very rational explanation we all assumed for it all. Even if it was a sort of reality distortion, meaning it really wasn't real, even if he was deluded on some level, he found some comfort in it. So that's the trick with it, and that's, you know, instantly when I met these actors to cast, when I met Josh and I met Ashton, I knew they would fall in love with these characters, and it's through that the audience will understand and be connected with these guys. The last recession really downsized businesses and created a new normal. And the days of the corporate pensions and being there for 50 years and working in sort of one job, I think are becoming less and less. But what it's doing is it's forcing the culture to look inside itself and to self-motivate. And that's something that we all have. I mean, to a person, I've never met someone who doesn't have a dream they once had of doing one particular thing or being a particular kind of person, and has sort of left sort of society to sort of beat them down on it. And Steve was a misfit, and he was really misunderstood, and he was not easy. And there was nothing to say that that man would have done anything. I mean, he was sort of a hippie who kind of smelled, and he was difficult to get along with, and he recognized cool things, and he associated himself, but there was nothing to say that that kid would have ever become what he became. But that kid is everybody. That's what I love about this movie. He wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He wasn't born as the heir to something that his father had created. He was self-made. And this movie is about people who are self-made and should go out there after this, you know, they see this film and realize that what Steve says in this film towards the end, that when you wake up and realize that the world was created by people no smarter than you, is a very freeing, liberating thought, because that means you could go out and do something even greater.